A spectacular guest sitting in front of me.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishi K.
Cathy O'Dowd is a South African mountaineer and motivational speaker. She now resides in Andorra, a small mountainous country between Spain and France. I wonder if any of you have been there. If you have, well, great. And Cathy says the first time ever she's been in India. The first woman in the world to climb Mt Everest, the world's highest mountain, from both its north and south sides. And she remains an active adventurer today. Hi, Cathy. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here, Rishi.
First trip to India. I mean, how did that ever happen? I mean, here are you climbing Mount Everest twice over, mostly done from Nepal. You're so close by. How did this trip never ever happen?
Well, you're a little short on the highest mountains in the world. It's not that you don't have thousands of beautiful mountains, but the really big ones are sitting in, Nepal and China. So when I was younger, that was kind of the focus. But I've had two things I wanted to do for years. And one was have a chance to come to India and share some of my stories, because I know this is an enormous audience of people who are very focused on storytelling. And the other was to come and finally have a chance to enjoy some of those beautiful Indian mountains. So this year is about the speaking, thanks to my very generous sponsor, Speaking Minds. And I'm hoping that next year is going to be about the mountain. I have some plans and I'm going to be back.
Wonderful. Now, you don't, start off wanting to be a mountaineer in primary school, do you?
No, you really don't.
When did that bug first bite you? Did you go camping when you were young? And where did you grow up? Did you grow up in South Africa or elsewhere?
Yes, I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in Johannesburg, which is on this giant grass plain. It may be high, but it doesn't feel high. It doesn't look high. And my family were typically suburban. No outdoor interests at all. You go for a few day walks in the summer holidays. But I got sent on a summer camp when I was a young teenager. And that was my first opportunity to kind of camp. It's like, wow. The height, the space, the mountains, this is interesting. But I didn't get another opportunity till I got to university and they had a rock climbing club. And I was terrible at sport at school. People assume that I'm some kind of natural athlete. I was the girl who was, having a stomach ache to get out of having to do hockey or so, go running or something.
That is definitely a surprise, because as you will notice when I put pictures up, Cathy, I would imagine would have six-pack abs. Continue. So you weren't the sporty kind.
Sport. I don't connect well with balls. I don't do well with having to lose so someone else can win. I just don't like that sort of competitive sport.
We need more like you in the South African cricket team so that you can keep losing to India. Just joking.
Oh, well, I grew up in a country that worshipped cricket and then rugby.
Did you ever go to the Wanderers? Such a lovely ground.
It's a beautiful ground, and no, I've never been.
That's okay, you're forgiven, because you've climbed Mount Everest twice. That earns you some major credentials, Cathy.
Oh, well, thank you. It excuses me from the Wanderers trip.
We're going to come back and talk to Cathy about, growing up and eventually how she got into mountaineering. More of that, Dire Straits and Sultans of Swing. Sultans of Swing, Dire Straits at 9:07. Cathy O'Dowd. She's climbed Everest from both sides, the world's highest mountain. The first woman in the world to climb it from both its north and south sides, and she remains an active adventurer even till today.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishi K.
So you're telling me now about your childhood. So you got interested in climbing. Thereon, continue that story.
Well, I found rock climbing at university, and for the first time I found the sport that was so personal. It happened outdoors, it was wild and adventurous, and it wasn't a kind of a win-lose competition. It was about solving a puzzle. You have your body, what you're capable of, you have your mind, how you deal with fear, and then you have this puzzle of holes on the rock face, and you're trying to solve this thing. And I loved that. And then I was just curious. What would it be like to try a higher rock face? What would it be like to try a real mountain? And obviously we had to travel from South Africa. So I started with Central Africa, the Mountains of the Moon, the Ruwenzori. And then we went to South America, to the Andes, and always driven by curiosity. Go a little bit higher, try something slightly harder, see whether I'm capable of doing it. And then I wanted the Himalaya. I read this book about the first all-woman expedition to an 8,000-meter peak. And that was the first time I really thought, wow, girls can do this too. You know, it feels like such a man thing, you know, conquering mountains. And I just read Arlene Bloom's book and I thought, wow, I could try this. I can see myself in this space. And I was trying to find that opportunity to get to the Himalaya, anywhere in the Himalaya, which is this mythical mountain range. And then up came the first South African Everest expedition. And of course they'd picked a bunch of men. You know, they had this big, tough team doing all the photographs in the media. And they had a sponsoring newspaper who decided that the whole project just didn't sound all that interesting, really, actually. I mean, we're a country of cricket and rugby, not of mountain climbing. And they decided to try and sex up the coverage by running a competition to find a girl to add to the team, as if the men were going to walk her up to the summit and fly her like a flag at the top. You know, it really was terribly disrespectful. But I just looked at this and I thought, I don't care whether it's sexist or not. I just see an opportunity.
Wow. So that opportunity happens, and tell me about the north side and the south side, both the sides that you've summited from. Where do you start off from?
Well, so the first South African Everest expedition did the south side, which is the classic route that was climbed by Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay back in 53.
And Bachendri Pal, who was the first Indian woman to get up to Everest, and also Krishna Patil, who was a friend, who was the youngest Indian woman to climb Everest. So all you wonderful, glorious people, continue. Yeah.
Oh, India has a wonderful history in the mountains. We were on Everest when the first, as I understand it, the first non-army Indian expedition climbed the mountain. That was on the north side in, I think, 98. And what I remember is they were the first team to summit, one of the very first teams. And we were all camped at the advanced base camp. And there's kind of this road of rock, and the tents are set up on either side. And the Indian team came walking back down this path of rock. And everyone, all the other teams came out of their tents and we were applauding as they walked through. It was just this wonderful moment of shared camaraderie. Yes, you achieved this thing and we're so proud of you.
Genesis, Land of Confusion, Cathy O'Dowd, the mountaineer, in studio. More conversation in a couple of minutes right after this. It's 11 minutes past 9 a.m. My name is Hrishi K. Genesis, Land of Confusion, Cathy O'Dowd, who summited Everest from both sides and then was part of the team that did the first ascent of Nanga Parbat via the Mazeno Ridge in her most recent expedition, a ski mountaineering ascent of Mount Logan, the second highest peak in North America. She's in town for some motivational talks, and I'm in conversation with her. So you were telling me the south side is the traditional route, yeah?
Yes.
Tell me about that route and also the north side. Which side do you summit from? Yeah.
Well, the south side, they're so different, the two routes. The south side, you enter through this enormous icefall. We've all seen those photographs, the ladders across the crevasses, and this is where the earthquake brought down the terrible avalanche on top of the climber. So that's a dangerous passage. But once you're through, you're in this huge valley, trapped between three enormous mountains, one of which is Everest. And you climb up in this kind of amphitheatre of mountain. But when you go into the north side, you travel in across the Tibetan plateau, and then you just have the north face, and it's enormous in your face. And it just gets harder as you get higher and higher and higher. So the hardest climbing is right at the top, which means, of course, that's when you're furthest from help, you've got the least oxygen, you're the most tired. But on the other hand, the sense of space. You're this tiny ant crawling up the top of the north face, looking out over hundreds of miles of Tibet. And then you finally hit the summit, peek over the other side, and you can look across Nepal into India. I mean, the distance you can see on a clear day from that mountain is just extraordinary.
You've also tried to summit it from the east side. Is that so? What side would that be?
Well, it's effectively, we talk about the two classic routes, but there are actually, I think now, 15 routes. It's an enormous mountain. And there's potential for new routes. I mean, people talk about Everest being crowded or Everest being done, but you want adventure. There are at least 2 unclimbed lines on the east side that are basically too difficult for our generation. And our generation is good. The climbing standard has gone up hugely. But there are things left for our children and our grandchildren to do. They really are. And you will be the only team on the east side, that I can promise.
That's lovely. There's an opportunity for people who want to hear you speak. Where can they get in touch? Is there a website? Is there an email ID, please? Yeah.
Well, I've been brought over to India by a wonderful organization called Speaking Minds. So it's www.speakingminds.com or info@speakingminds.com. Because what I love doing is taking these stories from the mountains and turning them into something that matters to people who are never going to climb a mountain. Because most of you are quite sensible about life and you don't want to climb mountains.
Or idiotic about life, Cathy. Depends on how you see it.
No, I respect being sensible. But there's a lot to be learned about taking a team and putting them in this high-risk, high-stress environment, pursuing these big goals, trying to persuade these sort of A-type, very uber-confident, big-ego climbers to collaborate rather than compete with each other, to work together to achieve these big goals. And it makes for an amazing message, both to corporate clients and to the general public, about just what it takes to keep it together, work together as a team, and manage to achieve.
Pictures of Cathy O'Dowd coming up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as if you want to interact with her, you can use SMS. So it's HRISHIKAY on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We'll also try and do a small video and put it up post the interview for people who've missed out, or if you want to revisit that. One space your comment and name or question and name to 53650. 53650 is the in-studio SMS line. Or you could tweet back or post back reactions on HRISHIKAY. Facebook.com/radio1.mum is our official page. Please like that page. Leave a comment or question for Cathy on the timeline or inbox. I'm going to take some messages and a Mark Anthony song called I've Got You. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Messages and back. I'm Hrishi K. It's 9:20.
94.3 Radio 1.
Mark Anthony, I've got you some wonderful messages. Thank you very much. Pradeep Nagpal, these endeavors only signify that all the limits are in our mind. Keep climbing, Cathy. Rakesh Anand Bakshi, climbing mountains is climbing down harder and more challenging, or climbing up harder and challenging? That's a question for you. Answer that.
They're both difficult in different ways. Yes, it's easier to climb down. Gravity's on your side. It's a huge help. But it's the end of the climb. You're tired. Your mind has already gone home. Climbers aren't well focused. And of course, if you trip going down, you're going to start rolling down the mountain, which is seriously a bad idea on these enormous mountains. So a lot of accidents do happen on the way down. You're quite right. It's one of the most dangerous moments of the expedition. And it's about holding it together mentally, even when you're really tired.
Marco Angelo D'Souza, something about Cathy's lovely accent reminds me of Julie Andrews in Sound of Music.
Oh, well, thank you.
Which also gels with Climb Every Mountain, he says. Thank you very much. Julie Andrews in Sound of Music. Wow, wasn't she lovely? Parul, Rock King morning, and she's got rock in quotes. The Everest and Sultans of Swing, Radio 1 the best. Cathy talking about facing your fear, and she's hashtag inspiring women. Absolutely inspiring woman. Jiten Bhagat, great morning song, Sultans of Swing. Actually, it's an anytime song, Dire Straits. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Keep the messages coming. Are you on Facebook or Twitter at all?
Absolutely. I'm active on Twitter and Instagram at Cathy O'Dowd, and I'm on Facebook at Cathy O'Dowd Everest.
Just spell it quickly for us, please, Indians.
CATHYODOWD.
There you've got it, and you can follow her. More conversation now.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishi K.
Radio 1.
Tell me about this wonderful color run that you're doing over the weekend. Yeah, it's Sunday.
Well, firstly, I'm really excited to be here for Holi, because I've seen photographs and it looks like it's just going to be the most ridiculous Indian-style party. And then the Empower Ride is a cycle ride for mental wellness, which I think it's enormously important because exercise makes a big difference to mental health. Getting out and getting active is a really great way to combat various demons in our heads. So this opportunity to take part in the cycle ride, take part in the colour run, and stand up for something as important as talking about the stigma, talking out about mental wellness matters. And this is something we should acknowledge and we should support.
Beautiful. So if you want to meet Cathy, you got to keep an eye out. Just do a quick Google, get onto the site, and you know where it's happening and what the route is. And maybe you can go and join her. It'll be just a 10-kilometer thing. Maybe you can walk through it if you're not happy with running. Your book, and how beautifully have you titled it? You could have titled it all those fancy titles, but you didn't. You just chose to keep it simple. What is it about? And tell us the title.
Yes, I wrote a book about my 4 Everest expeditions called Just for the Love of It. Because I got so tired of people, I'm sorry, but mostly men, writing books called things like Killer Mountain. And we choose to do this. We do this for the joy of it. And I want to capture that. I want to capture, despite all the difficulties and the things that can go wrong and the risks, at its essence, this is a joyful experience. It's a way of fulfilling our potential. It's a way of immersing ourselves in the most beautiful, wild corners of the world. And I wanted to write a book that captured the love of it and that captured with emotional honesty what it really feels like, because it's not just a physical challenge. That's kind of entry level, being fit enough, being competent. On top of that, it's a massive mental and emotional challenge, and that's where most people fail. Holding it together, staying motivated, staying focused, remembering why you choose to do this, finding the joy despite the difficulty. I wanted to write a book that talked about it, what it really feels like to be on the side of that mountain.
Beautiful. Just for your information, all of you who are listening, Just for the Love of It has made both the Amazon Mountaineering and New York Times Sport bestseller list. And it's available, on all online sites. So go ahead and get it. Just for the Love of It. There you go. Okay, Jamelia, superstar, right after this. 1996 was a tricky year, and Cathy was there attempting to summit Everest. And the movie Everest has elements of that. We're going to talk about that. Superstar by Jamelia, Cathy O'Dowd. She summited Everest 4 times. The first woman ever to do it from both the north and the south sides. And she's a South African who lives in Andorra. And I'm in conversation with her. What an inspiring story at 9:37 in the morning. Okay, now 1996 was a very unfortunate year, and the movie Everest has elements of that. We are going to make a video and put it up for people who missed the interview, but I'm presuming that these people are going to get to work and they're not going to watch that video. So you're going to have to repeat that. So what really happened in 1996? And you obviously survived. Was it a twist of fate or destiny or what?
Oh, that's a big question, what really happened. But let me give you a little bit of that answer. So there were 4 teams that moved up to the top camp, the 8,000-meter camp on Everest. In the film, they tell the story of 2 of them. But actually, there were 2 more, and we were one of those others. And we got to that very top camp, and the weather wasn't good. It wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't stable. And we knew we were the least experienced of these teams. And we knew we had to be careful. We just didn't have the ability, the experience to take big risks. So we decided to wait for the weather to stabilize, which was a gut-wrenching choice because the other teams went. And one of them's led by a man who's climbed Everest 5 times at that point, Rob Hall. So clearly you think he knows what he's doing. And then they got to the summit of Everest, and there's just that heart-sinking moment where you think, oh no, we're not good enough. We should have gone. We've blown our chance. And then within hours, the storm had blown in. And those climbers were still trying to get back to camp. 21 climbers caught up in the storm. By the time the storm had died out, 2 days later, 5 of those climbers were dead, some others on the north side of Everest. And we sat out that storm, trapped in our tents at 8,000 meters, hearing tiny fragments of broken conversation on the radio that slowly made it clear that people were missing. And then eventually you start to realize that some of these people just aren't going to be coming back. I think what isn't obvious to people from the outside is how little you understand about what's going on. When you're in the heart of a disaster, all you experience is just confusion. It took days afterwards to fully realize the extent of the tragedy, what had genuinely happened. At the time, all you're trying to do is survive.
We're going to say bye-bye to Cathy O'Dowd up ahead. I'm going to ask her what she felt when she summited Everest for the very first time at the peak, if she could ever describe it. Your last opportunity to comment or ask questions. One space, your comment and name to 53650 on SMS, HRISHIKAY on Twitter, Instagram, as well as Facebook, and facebook.com/radio1.mum, our official page, the most liked Facebook page across all radio stations in Mumbai city. Feel free to drop a comment on the timeline or inbox or even a question for Cathy, and I will read it out on air. Messages and back.
94.3 Radio 1.
Yes, Mr. Lover Shaggy is back. It's a hot current hit called Seasons. Shaggy and Omi. 9:48. Got to say bye to Cathy O'Dowd, the mountaineer and the motivational speaker. She summited Everest 4 times, both from the north as well as the south sides. And here's the last leg.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishi K.
Radio 1.
What did you feel like? What was going through your mind the first ever time you summited Everest and you were on that peak? Could you describe it?
The best moment wasn't actually the summit, because as soon as you reach the summit, you start to worry about getting down again safely, because it's not over just because you're at the top. The best moment was looking along the final knife-edge ridge and thinking, I can do that. The moment when I realized I was going to get to the summit of Everest, that enormous sense of, yes, this is going to work. It's so close, I can feel it. But then on the summit itself, the best moment of that, actually, it's not the summit, which is just a pile of snow. We were talking to a radio station in South Africa. So the first thing they do is put my mother on the phone. So I've got my...
That's what we do. Radio stations
exactly.
do that. Yeah.
You go to the ends of the earth and you still can't get away from your mother. And of course, the first thing she asks is, darling, where are you? I was like, I'm on top of the world.
Well,
literally. I'm standing on the summit of Everest. And I think what's really special to me about that moment was not just her joy that I'd achieved it. I mean, obviously she was desperately worried, but she never said it. What really mattered to me was the gift she gave me of never being anything other than encouraging. Here I was, the only girl, the youngest child, and I come home at 18 and announce I've taken up rock climbing. And then a decade later, hey, Mom, I'm off to Everest. And all she ever said was, wow, that's amazing. How can I help? And that's such a gift, particularly to give to girls. You know, as we come into Women's Day tomorrow, I'm delighted to be celebrating that in India. This gift we give to girls, don't guilt them, don't try and protect them, don't tell them that they shouldn't, or it's not feminine, or it's not safe. Say, yes, I'm proud of you. How can I help?
Beautiful. Cathy, this has been really, really special. Thank you for rolling by. Best of luck in India. We hope that you keep coming back all the time. Got a couple of questions just before you go. Malcolm Raphael, what made you decide to climb Everest? What was the inspiration? Was it a personal experience, or was it a person?
It was a personal experience in the sense that I love mountains. It's not that Everest's the most important, but when somebody offers a mountaineer a shot at the highest mountain on the planet, I mean, you're simply not going to say no.
So any particular moment in your life? Was it a revelation, or did you just slowly build up to it?
It was a slow burn. It was discovering the smallest mountains and then being driven by curiosity about trying things that were higher and colder and further.
Kaushal Nanavati, great interview with Cathy. I'm a huge fan of Sagar Mata. Have one question for Cathy. Has she seen Mr. Green Boots? What is Mr. Green Boots? Is it a movie? Yeah?
No. Yes, and I have seen Mr. Green Boots.
What is it?
He is a climber who very sadly died very high on the mountain, and his body is still lying on the route on the north side.
Is that... Are you serious?
Yes.
Yeah? Covered in ice?
Not... Well, when I saw him, no, not covered in ice. I mean, it is actually a growing problem as more and more people go to Everest.
Sure.
People who die high up. It's a giant deep freeze, so they simply look as if they're sleeping. But yes, you do have... There's a very real sense of this is what you're putting on the line when you do this thing.
1996 was huge. Kaushal goes on to say, I've read plenty about it. It's wonderful listening to Cathy. Vikram Alva, great interview. On that note, take care of yourself. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for having me.